Have you ever wondered how far a ruler would go to prove his power? What does it mean when a king does not simply defeat his enemy, but strips the flesh from his skull, covers it in silver, and drinks wine from it in front of his people? Is that barbarity, or the highest form of triumph? If a leader strengthens his nation with law, order, and unity, yet terrifies his enemies with cruelty beyond imagination, should history remember him as a savage or as a genius? This is the dilemma of Krum, Khan of the Bulgars, remembered forever as the Fearsome, a ruler who transformed his people from scattered tribes into a formidable empire, a man who wrote laws to discipline the drunk, punish the corrupt, and defend the weak, yet who also raised a chalice of bone at his feasts. He is the conqueror who annihilated an emperor of Byzantium, the lawgiver who forged order among chaos, and the barbarian who made civilized Rome tremble inside its golden capital. The story of Krum is one of paradox, one of savagery and statecraft entwined. To tell it, we must step into the 9th century, into a world of empires, tribes, and shifting power, where the skull of a king could become the cup of another. The Bulgars were a people forged on the steppes of Eurasia. Semi-nomadic, fierce horsemen, they carried with them traditions of war and survival, living by the sword and bow. By the late 7th century, they had crossed the Danube and carved out a place in the Balkans, settling alongside Slavic tribes. Their position was precarious, pressed between the rising Franks in the west, the ever-present Byzantines in the south, and nomadic raiders across the plains to the north. But in 803, a man named Krum rose to power. His origins remain shadowed. Some say he was of Bulgar noble lineage, others that he emerged from the lands once ruled by the Avars. What matters is not where he came from, but what he did. He inherited a people caught in the jaws of greater empires, and he refused to let them be crushed. His first test was against the Avars themselves, an old, nomadic confederation that had once terrorized Europe. For centuries, the Avars had raided, enslaved, and dominated, but by Krum's time they were weakened. Krum struck swiftly, dismantling their power, seizing their lands, and absorbing their survivors into his domain. It was an act of conquest, but also one of state-building. He did not merely plunder and move on. He expanded his base of manpower, wealth, and territory. Where the Avars vanished from history, the Bulgars surged forward. This victory alone made Krum's neighbors uneasy. Byzantium, the so-called heir of Rome, regarded the Bulgars as dangerous barbarians at their northern gates. To Constantinople, these tribes were a threat to trade routes, to fortresses, to imperial pride. Yet what Byzantium underestimated was Krum's vision. He did not see himself as a raider, he saw himself as a ruler. In 809, he struck at the heart of Byzantine defenses. His armies besieged the city of Serdica, today known as Sofia. The Byzantines trusted in its strong walls, but Krum's persistence overwhelmed them. When the city fell, he slaughtered thousands of defenders. This was not random cruelty, it was a message that the empire's fortresses were not invincible, and that the Bulgars had come, not to raid, but to stay. The news reached Constantinople like thunder. Emperor Nikephoros was outraged. He had spent his reign trying to restore Byzantine power, to fill his treasury with heavy taxes, and to prove himself a ruler equal to the great emperors of old. Now a so-called barbarian had humiliated his empire. Nikephoros gathered his armies, one of the largest in his reign, and in 811 he marched north into Bulgar lands. The campaign began with fire and fury. Byzantine troops plundered villages, burned homes, and massacred inhabitants. Chroniclers say the destruction was total, nothing was spared. Nikephoros believed he was teaching the Bulgars a lesson they would never forget. He even desecrated sacred sites, believing this would break their spirit. For a moment it seemed as if the empire's power was unstoppable. But Krum was not broken. He retreated, avoided battle, and watched. He let Nikephoros march deeper, let him believe the Bulgars were fleeing, and then, at the Varbitsa pass, he set his trap. The pass was narrow, a corridor between mountains. There Krum's men had prepared barricades of wood, earth, and stone, blocking the exits. When the Byzantines arrived, they found themselves trapped, cut off from escape. Krum's forces descended with terrifying ferocity. Exhausted, drunk from their plunder, and disorganized, the Byzantine army collapsed. The slaughter was catastrophic. The proud imperial forces were annihilated, their banners trampled into mud and blood. And then came the unthinkable. Emperor Nikephoros himself was killed. A Byzantine emperor, heir to Constantine, master of Constantinople, cut down in a barbarian trap. His head was severed, his body left dishonored. No enemy in centuries had slain a Byzantine emperor in battle. The empire reeled in shock. Constantinople wept. The mighty had fallen. But for Krum, victory was not enough. He took Nikephoros' skull, stripped it of flesh, and ordered it lined with silver. From then on, he used it as a drinking cup at his feasts. Chroniclers tell us he drank wine from it before his nobles, raising it as a symbol of triumph. To us, it sounds grotesque, but in steppe traditions, it was not entirely unheard of. To drink from the skull of an enemy was to take his strength, to show mastery even in death. For the Bulgars, it was awe-inspiring. For the Byzantines, it was horror beyond imagination. The skull cup became legend, a symbol of Krum's fearsome rule. And yet Krum was not merely a man of violence. After his victories, he issued laws to govern his people. These laws were strict, even harsh, but they brought order. Theft was punished severely. Corruption was crushed. Wealthy nobles were forced to share resources in times of hardship. Drunkenness was outlawed, for Krum believed it weakened his warriors. False witnesses were punished ruthlessly. Historians compare these laws to those of Charlemagne in the West or the codices of Byzantium. They were primitive in form, but powerful in effect. They disciplined the Bulgar state, united tribes under common rules, and gave the Khan authority not just as a warlord, but as a lawgiver. Krum became more than a conqueror. He became a state builder. His campaigns did not end with Nikephoros. In 813, Krum once again descended upon Byzantium. He ravaged Thrace, took fortresses, and drove refugees flooding toward Constantinople. Chroniclers describe him performing sacrifices outside the city walls, vowing to burn the golden capital to the ground. The Byzantines, trapped inside, prayed desperately. They believed the Virgin Mary herself protected the city, for no barbarian army had ever taken it. Inside the city, the throne passed from hand to hand in desperation. Michael I abdicated, and the general Leo V seized power. In a desperate ploy, Leo offered peace negotiations. Krum, suspicious yet intrigued, came to the walls to parley. But the Byzantines attempted treachery, launching assassins at him during the meeting. Krum barely escaped his life, wounded but alive. The betrayal enraged him. He unleashed his fury upon the surrounding lands, ordering his armies to burn churches, slaughter civilians, and take captives. The countryside was left in ruins. Constantinople trembled, knowing that if Krum lived, he would return. But fate intervened. In 814, as he prepared a massive assault on the city itself, Krum died suddenly. Some say it was a stroke, others poison, but whatever the cause, the empire was spared. His death ended a reign that had lasted barely a decade, but had changed the balance of power in the Balkans forever. Krum left behind a paradoxical legacy. To the Byzantines, he was a monster, a barbarian who drank from skulls and burned churches. To his own people, he was a strong ruler who gave them laws, victories, and pride. He is remembered in Bulgarian tradition as both conqueror and protector, a man who stood against the empire and proved that even the mightiest could fall. History still debates him. Was he savage, or was he a genius strategist? Was he a barbarian, or was he a state builder ahead of his time? Perhaps he was all of these things, for history is rarely simple.
What is certain is that his skull cup remains one of the most haunting images of medieval history, a reminder that power is not only written in books and laws, but carved into bone and blood, a reminder that even emperors can be reduced to vessels for their enemies. And so, when we remember Krum, we do not call him simply Khan of the Bulgars. We remember him as Krum the Fearsome, the ruler who drank from the skull of an emperor, who built a nation with law, and who carved his legacy into the memory of both friend and foe. Because in the end, history does not belong to the gentle. It belongs to those who, in victory, dared to raise a cup and dared to drink. Thanks for watching.